This retired spy invokes the wrath of international bad guys after his stepson downloads some really sussy stuff on the internet. Which reminds me, I gotta clear my internet history. So we're straight away introduced to our spy, Bob Ho, and I already know I'm going to love this movie. He's a CIA agent and he's just doing agent things. But in the next scene, he's a regular guy living in a cool neighborhood. Next up, we see this lady, Jillian, being disturbed by her 3 kids and her little pig. They won't let her get some sleep, but she's a super mom, it would appear, cause she's handling this perfectly with a smile on her face. She gets her kids ready for school and takes them out to the car. Before she gets in the car, she sees the garbage truck, so she tries to wheel her garbage to them. But Bob, being a gentleman, comes around to help her. Oh, wait a minute. Are they dating? He just tried to move in, and apparently they have a date for tonight. Interesting. The older kids, Farron and Ian, don't like Bob. They think he's a boring pen importer, a loser, a robot, all of that. Come on, he's Jackie Chan. Ian even calls him a cyborg sent to destroy humanity, starting with them. I said Jackie Chan, not Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, since Bob and Jillian can't kiss in front of the kids, they wait till dinner to do their thing. They're celebrating 3 months of being together. Just 3 months? We're celebrating every second these days, huh? Sorry, I'm just jealous. Anyway, as dinner's going on, Bob says he wants to tell her about his job. But you know movies, well, and women. She doesn't let him talk. She starts talking about her kids and how they hate her. He says he can make them like him, but she doesn't think so. While they're talking, Bob gets paged to come to work. It's an emergency. He tells Jillian he'll explain everything tomorrow and he leaves. He gets to work, goes through a false door, changes into his leather jacket while he's being briefed about this mission, and boom, he's out on the field with his partner, Colton. He jumps down into a tunnel alone. Inside the tunnel is a lab. A man throws C4 to his guards and tells them to blow up this place once they're done. Bob, by the way, is making his way into the lab pretty stealthily. He now jumps down to attack the men. He beats up the guards, and the main guy crushes something in his hands and immediately runs away. But of course, Bob catches up with him, and now they have to fight. Bob's weapon is his belt, by the way, just like Batman. It doubles as a belt and a sword. The fight seems evenly matched. Both of them know how to jump around pretty well, but it quickly comes to an end when Bob's backup agents show up and round the men up. Bob gets back to the office and everyone is cheering for him. His boss says he's the best agent he's ever had, and he's sad to see him go. Apparently, this was Bob's last mission, and he's now retiring. He wants a normal life and wants to get married. The only problem is that her kids hate him, but he encourages himself. He says he has brought down dictators. How tough can kids be? You're about to find out. By the way, his boss asks him to keep the CIA watch. Bob now heads home with flowers for Jillian. They're all outside trying to get the cat to calm down, but immediately as Bob shows up, the kids disappear into the house. Well, except Nora. She's still waiting for her cat. So when Jillian goes in, Bob looks around and then climbs up pretty dramatically to retrieve the cat for her. But my man, she already loves you. It's the older ones you need to be scoring points with. He goes into the house and oh, Jillian is a painter. They quickly discuss last night and Bob says he understands that if a man marries her, he marries all 4 of them. She makes sure to remind him to include the cat, the pig, and the turtle. Run away now, bro. Anyway, Bob says that her new painting frightens him, and I feel seen. She says she feels like she found the last honest man in the world. Oops, wait till you find out he's not actually a pen importer. Sis, he's just a liar like the rest of us. But she doesn't know that yet, though. So she hugs him. Ian sees them hugging and he doesn't like the sight, so he goes to line up the Avengers. As Jillian goes to give her kids cookies, she sees 3 of them folding their arms and waiting for her in the hallway. The oldest one asks if it's true that she's going to marry Bob. Oh, come on, Ian. What did you tell them? It was just a hug. He wasn't down on one knee. By the way, you can tell that the little girl doesn't even know what's going on here. She was probably coerced into being here. The kids just keep saying Bob is boring, but Jillian tells them that what they call boring is what she calls dependable. She gets emotional now and she just leaves them and goes into her room. She says her happiness counts too. Oh yes, it does, my dear. Don't mind these dictators. And the dictators don't even care that their mother is a wreck right now. They just go straight for the cookies. Anyway, at the CIA office, there's a little trouble and it looks like there's a mole in the agency. And not the cute furry kind. Some dangerous Russian guy, Anton Poldark, got broken out of prison. I'm sure you already know what this means. Bob will definitely have to be called out of retirement at some point. But for now, he's wearing a mask and climbing up Jillian's house in a way Peter Parker would be proud of. She complained about her satellite earlier, so he's helping her fix it. What a guy, right? I just know this is something I'll never do. And maybe that's why I'm still single. Anyway, he fixes the satellite while Farron is being a teenager with Jillian, yelling and all that stuff, simply because she asked her to come downstairs. Farron says she wants privacy, so she goes out to the roof and is talking to her friend over the phone, telling them she can't let Jillian marry Bob. These kids have no chill. Anyway, Bob can hear the phone conversation loud and clear. Now he gets some clarity about why she hates him. Farron is bothered about what's going to happen when her dad comes back. If Jillian is married at that point, it makes everything a little complicated for her. Farron is Jillian's stepdaughter, by the way, so you can understand her dilemma. The next morning at breakfast, Ian feeds the pig some bacon. Now come on, man, that's just all shades of wrong. Over at Bob's, while he's making himself breakfast, Colton calls him and tells him that Poldark escaped. You can see Bob is concerned, but he says Poldark is no longer his problem. Colton says cool, but they recovered a file, and he'd like Bob to take a look at it. No pressure. Bob says he'll do it as a favor to him, and before they get off the call, Colton tells him they're suspecting that there's a mole in the agency. Bob thinks it's him they're suspecting, but Colton says nah. Bob now heads over to his work desk, but as he's about to start work, he hears the doorbell. It's Jillian. Her father's in the hospital for a hip replacement, so she has to fly to Denver immediately to be with him, but she can't go with the kids. She says her aunt is flying in from San Antonio to be with them, but Bob wants to play babysitter babysitter. He literally begs to do it. Well, he's unemployed now, might as well give him the job. He gets the gig. She says goodbyes to the kids and leaves them in Bob's care. Once Bob goes into the room to park his things, these little dictators immediately start going through his things, including his computer. Ian starts downloading Stockholm GPH from Bob's computer, and we quickly cut to Poldark and his girlfriend Tatiana. On their computer screen is also Stockholm GBH. She's also trying to download it, and she finds it being accessed by a third party. She immediately starts tracing the ISP. Hacker moment. Poldark thinks it's the US or China. Little does he know that it's this annoying little dictator who just hates his mother's boyfriend. Poldark orders Tatiana to retrieve the formula and clap whoever has downloaded it. Back at the house, Bob has to separate the kids who are fighting in the middle of the night, and then try to put Nora to sleep. I wonder where kids get their strength from. I mean, look at her just running around the house. She won't even let Bob put on her night dress for her, so he takes matters into his own hands, throws her up, and she drops inside the dress. I mean, she could have ended up with a cracked skull, but it seems pretty effective to me. He finally succeeds putting everybody to sleep, well except Farron, but that doesn't count. Jillian calls to check how Bob is doing, and she tries to get him to talk about his job, but he says it can wait till she gets back. The following morning, Bob makes an absolute disaster breakfast, and then takes the kids to school. At school, Ian quickly tries to earn some cool points by showing his bullies what he downloaded last night, but they're not impressed. They've already seen the video with the girls and the cup, if you know what I mean. Just kidding. So they give him a wedgie and throw him into the garbage can. Meanwhile, Bob and Nora are shopping for Halloween, and this lad really wanted this little girl to go as a zombie. Thank God for this woman who comes to save the day and asks Nora if she wants to be a princess. Nora says yes, you know, just like every other girl her age, or boy, these days. Bob first puts her in an oversized princess costume. He then turns around to look for a better fit, and in that 1 second he takes his eyes off her, she disappears. And the problem is there are about 100 little girls in here in the exact same costume. Bob is frantically looking for Nora now, and where does he find her? On the escalator. How the hell did this little girl end up there? In how many seconds? Now Bob has to do an elaborate stunt to reach her. Now he's just flexing. He does reach her though, and he then gets a call from Ian's school. He heads straight there, and now he's in the principal's office with Ian, who's making a good case for himself. He was the one who got bullied. How the hell is he the bad guy now? The principal says Ian is always lying, and that seems like it's true because the little boy drops another bomb in the hallway when he sees his bullies. He tells them Bob is a bodyguard he hired. Now come on, boy. Bob just politely asks the bullies to let them go, and they do. They head to the gym to see Farron. Bob says he didn't know she was into gymnastics, and she says he doesn't know anything about them because he's always hanging out with Jillian and never talking to them. Cry me a river. We now head to Poldark and his people. They're running a test. They pour some black greasy thing on the floor and add a drop of fluorescent liquid. The combination quickly melts Tatiana's shoes and more or less disappears. I sincerely don't know what just happened here, but everyone is clapping. So it's progress, I guess. At the house, Bob now goes to have a word with Ian. He encourages him to stand up to his bullies. He also tells him he can tell the truth from now on. He won't tell his mom about today. Ian says that's almost cool. It seems like he's warming up to Bob now. But later at night, Farron feeds Nora sugar so that she's super active until late into the night. Bob is trying everything to put her to sleep, but nothing is working. He has to whip out his secret weapon, chloroform. Just kidding. This Chinese lullaby which puts even the cat to sleep. Bob now goes to the living room and calls Colton. He says he needs his help. Colton pulls up in no time with the stuff Bob asked for. And no, he doesn't need these for another CIA mission. He needs them to get the kids ready for school tomorrow. And it works out just fine, because the tools actually help him to get the kids ready earlier and more efficiently. But his efficiency bothers Farron, so she decides to trip him over while he's taking the trash out, and he falls over with the trash all over him. Trashy. Later, Nora goes missing while they're shopping, but the tracker he put on her helps him find her easily. They get home and the kids go in and lock the door, so Bob has to use his suspenders to get into the house. He also uses his tools to detect when Ian tries to steal soda, uses it to make breakfast, and uses it to stop Nora from her nightly run. Then later at night, he joins Farron on the roof, and they have a little heart-to-heart. She tells him how her mom died when she was little, and then her dad married Jillian. She still believes her dad loves her and will be back for her. I doubt it. Bob doesn't know how to break it to her, so he just offers to build her a railing on the roof, so she can at least be safe when she comes out here to chill. As they're chilling out here, Tatiana finds Bob's address as the third party that downloaded Poldark's formula, so she heads out with some men. In the morning, Bob drops the kids at school 30 minutes early, and his fashion advice to Ian is already helping the little man pick up girls. Farron tells him that the talk on the roof last night doesn't mean they're friends and leaves. Tatiana and her men are now at Bob's house. Of course, nobody's there, but just one look at his computer, she can tell whose house this is. Of course, they know Bob. I mean, he's Bob Ho. Sorry, like his name is Bob Ho, right? One of her men takes something from his cereal box and puts it in his pocket, and Tatiana calls them together to address them. As she's talking, Bob is climbing into Jillian's house behind her. The men draw her attention to him, and they immediately go after him. Bob has to fight these guys with Nora there serving as both an audience and an obstruction. But hey, this guy's Chinese and CIA. How do you think he did? Of course, he beat them all up and escaped unscathed. He and Nora. He immediately goes to the kids' school, picks them up, and heads straight to a Chinese restaurant. The kids go in and he makes a quick call outside. When he joins them, they're with this guy Larry. He pulls them out and takes them into the restaurant. Inside, he leaves Ian and Farron at the table and takes Nora to the bathroom. When he comes out, Larry is back at the table with them. The kids love him, but Bob is suspicious. To be fair, he's a CIA agent. His job is to be suspicious. And he was right to be that way. Just a little probing and Bob finds out that Larry speaks Russian. Since his cover is now blown, Larry resorts to fighting. He grabs the chef's knife and gets to it with Bob. But even without a weapon of his own, Bob still beats Larry's butt. Interestingly, all he needed to finish him off was a startling shout, and Larry went straight out the window. What is this, Skyrim? Of course, the kids think that was so cool. Nora says she no longer wants to be a princess. She wants to be Chinese. Just kidding, she wants to be a cyborg. But Bob is just trying to think here. How the hell did these people find him out so fast? The kids aren't letting him think, though. They're disturbing with their noise. So Bob just finally opens up to them. He tells them he's an international spy and someone wants him dead. He also tells them that Larry is a Russian operative. They don't seem to believe him, or perhaps they don't even understand. Kids are pretty dumb. Bob now goes out to meet his boss, Glaze. He tells Glaze nothing else matters until the kids are safe. So sweet. Glaze tells Bob he needs the file he downloaded. It's classified. He needs all copies. Bob says he didn't even open the file, and Mr. Suspicious is at it again. He suspects Glaze. He says he'll only think he downloaded the file if someone told him he did. Someone who wants it back. Glaze doesn't even have time to cover his butt, so he just pulls out his Glock and points it at Bob. He tells Bob that they're the same thing. They both want out of the force because of love. Only that Bob loves a woman, and he loves money. Something Poldark has offered him in abundance. Sigma male detected. Glaze puts his hand in Bob's pocket and is bitten by the turtle who was chilling in there. Bob quickly uses that opportunity to take the gun from Glaze and hit him to the ground. Combat turtle strikes again. He takes the kids and they hit the road. Ian is telling him he's the coolest guy his mom has ever dated. What about me? Meanwhile, Bob just figured that Larry found him so fast because of that watch Glaze asked him to keep. It has a tracking device in it. They now drive off to the desert to hide the watch under one of the rocks because Bob says the iron will hide the signal. Ian is just super excited to be part of this adventure, and he says if he told this story to anyone at school, he would get detention for a year. Well, you don't exactly have a good track record already, my man. While he's there, Colton calls him asking for the file, and you guessed it, Bob is suspicious again. He thinks Colton is also working with Poldark, so he hangs the phone up on him. At this point, they surely can't head home, so they go lodge in a hotel. Ian thinks all of this is super cool. Farron just wants to go home. Well, at least we now have two of the kids on our side. One more to go. Bob sings Nora to sleep while Farron gets on the phone with Jillian. She tells her all about Bob being a Chinese spy and the people trying to kill him. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Especially for Bob, who just looks like the guy next door. So Jillian thinks Farron is just cooking up stories because she hates Bob. So she asks her to give the phone to Bob. She apologizes for what Farron just said, but Bob just comes out clean. He tells her that Farron is actually telling the truth. Jillian is still struggling to believe everything she just heard, but Bob guarantees her that her kids are safe and tells her to come and get them. He's a little melancholic now, but instead of Ian reading the room, he's busy asking to see more cool spy stuff. But Bob is a man of the people, so he shows him his ring and his sword belt, with which Ian breaks a figurine, or what was that? After a good day of adventure, the kids are all asleep, while their mom is headed straight to the airport to take the next flight back home. Farron can't sleep though, because Ian is snoring like he's been learning a thing or two from their pet pig, so she goes to the living area to sit and talk with Bob. She asks if he and Jillian are over now. He says yes. Then she tells him that if he really loves her, he won't walk away so easily. Bob says it's actually because he loves her, and them that he has to walk away, for their own safety. Anyway, Farron thinks he might actually be better off not joining her family. She tells him he has no idea what it feels like living in a place where you don't belong. But Viola, he has more than an idea. He was an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, and never even knew his parents. I just said the same thing 3 times. The next morning, Jillian comes and gets her kids, and goes straight to land a slap on Bob's face. I swear I could see that slap coming from a mile away. For clarity though, she asks him again if he really is a spy, and of course his answer remains yes. He says he was going to tell her at dinner that day, but she stopped him. She says she doesn't care. He put her kids in danger. She asks him to leave. The kids now don't want him to go. Oh, how the turntables, right? Ian and Nora hug him goodbye, but Farron is keeping it gangster. Bob goes off to the desert now dressed in his spy outfit, and retrieves the watch from where he buried it. And what do we see next? Little Ian dressed in all black. He left a note on his computer for his mother, saying that he can no longer stay here because his destiny is to be a spy like Bob. So he'll be going with him. He goes out through the window, leaving behind the file he downloaded. Farron is on the roof when Ian climbs on his bike, so she sees him leave and follows him. Now we see Bob go into an abandoned building and drop the watch on a chair. As he does that, Glaze places a call to Poldark that the signal just popped back up, so they immediately head to the location. Bob is trying to set up a few things before the men arrive, but he has an early guest, Ian. Shortly after Ian arrives, Poldark and his men pull up in a fleet of cars and surround them. Plans ruined. Thanks, Ian. They immediately tie Bob and Ian together, and Bob is asking Ian how he found him. Apparently, the little boy found one of Bob's tracking devices and put it on him when he was hugging him goodbye. Bob is impressed. But more importantly, I'm impressed. But even more importantly, they're about to die. Anyway, Poldark asks Bob for the file he downloaded. He still insists he didn't download anything. As they're talking, Tatiana shows up with the cameras and microphones Bob mounted all over the place. Bob asks Glaze how he could betray his country, and he says it's easy. He'll be a billionaire. Some Elon Musk type shit. The file they're trying to get back is a formula for growth bacteria hybrid that eats soil, so it'll dry up oil supplies everywhere else except for Russia. Sounds like a terrible idea. Bob asks if Colton is a part of this, and Glaze says no. He now tries to negotiate the release of Ian, but Poldark quickly steps in and says they can't let him go because he will tell. But Bob assures him that no one will believe Ian. True that. Okay, now that track record of his could now work to our advantage, but as they're still negotiating Ian's release, Larry drags Farron in. She's now earned herself a seat at the bound table. Get it? It would have been perfect for her mom to call right now and she'd just just reply, "Mom, I'm currently tied up right now," but that doesn't happen, and I'm sorry about the pun. Anyway, Bob now tries to negotiate their release and promises to find the GPH file for them if they do. When he mentions GPH, Farron and Ian now chime in. They can't believe all this is happening because of some stupid, irrelevant file that Ian downloaded. Poldark asks him where the file is now, and he just straight away tells him it's on his iPod on his desk at home. Bob uses this opportunity to give him his first spy lesson: never tell the truth to the bad guy. Poldark immediately sends Tatiana and Cement to the house and tells her to kill anybody who stands in her way. While they leave, Bob is cutting himself loose with his ring. Poldark comes and points his gun at him, but Bob uses his legs to throw his gun away, then goes on to beat him up with the chair and then with Ian's bicycle. He does some pretty cool tricks and has all the men on the floor. They quickly get in the car and head home. On their way, Bob calls Jillian, but she keeps hanging up. Ian asks him if he has anyone in the agency he can trust. Bob says yes, but since they took his microphone and cameras, he has no proof of anything. But Ian is indeed learning fast because he recorded the entire conversation on his phone while they were here. So Bob calls Colton and plays him the recording. They somehow manage to get home just before the Russians, and no, it's Halloween. Jillian is confused, but Farron and Ian convince her to just play along. They go upstairs and Farron throws flames at one of the guys trying to climb in through the window. Meanwhile, downstairs, Bob can't find his tools, so he has to do this fight a cappella. He's doing a good job at it though. Meanwhile, Nora, who's dressed as a cyborg for Halloween, uses that little tool in her hand to send this big man flying. How you gonna let yourself get beat up by a little girl, huh, tough guy? By the way, when I say Bob is doing it a cappella, I really mean a cappella. Look at him making musical sounds with pants on this man's head. We all love a sonorous fighter, don't we? And it seems like Jillian has picked up a thing or two from her boyfriend, because she seems to take care of Tatiana pretty easily. But then her timing needs some work, because why she's trying to talk about their relationship right now? Bob tells her they'll talk about this later. Now they need to take care of Poldark and his men who are walking into the house now. Bob's belt was exchanged by Ian. Now Bob has to fight with a lamp, as his belt is no use, while Ian is upstairs beating one of the men with the sword belt. He beats him up and throws him downstairs, and it's perfect timing because just as the man falls out the window, his bullies are arriving in front of the house. Ian says hi to them, and now you can tell that they won't ever be messing with him again. Downstairs, Bob needs some help, and he gets it from Farron, who throws a television on Larry's head. She should have said, "Watch this," before throwing down the TV. It really would have been one of the lines of all time in history ever. That would have been so cool. Anyway, Bob gets to beating up Poldark, but then Glaze comes from behind and points a gun at him. But there's a good division of labor in this house because Jillian shows up and takes care of him. Shortly after, Colton and some agents show up and take Poldark, Glaze, and the other guys away. Ian hands over his iPod to Colton, and the day is saved. Bob apologizes to Colton for suspecting him, and then goes back to Jillian to apologize to her for putting her through all of this. He says goodbye and turns to leave, and Farron is no longer gangster. She goes to hunt Bob, and she makes a case for Bob to stay with tears in her eyes. In fact, this is the first time she calls Jillian mom. Bob has now finally succeeded in winning all the dictators over. No way she was going to let him go after that. So Jillian ends up getting married to the spy next door. If you're the type that enjoys movie fails, hang around because they serve us some really good and funny ones after the wedding. Jackie says he hates the English language, and I'm definitely with him on that one. Now let me focus on becoming a spy. Maybe that can finally help me bag a nice woman. Moral of the story? Being chilling.